My name is Dirk Horton, and I'm one of those lucky people who have been here 9 years, traveled the world, and I live on Jump Off Ridge, and I've been able to watch the beauty of this valley. But there's another reason why this valley is so beautiful. It's people like Wilford Woods, who hung in there from the beginning of his life to the end of his life and never gave up the understanding that it is a small group of people who make a place beautiful. And we are extraordinarily blessed from that continued understanding. We know now especially, we better not forget this, because right now, the people we really have to depend on is each other. The solutions to the problems we could see here, even in Wenatchee, are going to be solved by us. And he taught us that. It isn't multinationalization or anything that's going to save us as much as community nation. And watch it happens if we just can follow him and that beautiful man who gave us that legacy. We get an opportunity to make our valley great.
Well, my name's Elliot Scull, and I've known Wilf for many, many years. We moved to Wenatchee in 1975, and I can't remember when I met him, but it wasn't too long after that. But my story relates to the State Parks Commission. I was appointed to the State Parks Commission in the early 90s, and I think I was a new commissioner for maybe 6 months, 8 months. I'd been through a couple of meetings and was sort of somewhat intimidated by the whole process, because we met at Olympia and we traveled all over the state, and I met a whole group of people that I really was interested in meeting. But I'm an ophthalmologist, so if you can imagine, an ophthalmologist doesn't have a lot of experience in terms of park management and state parks issues. So I was learning pretty fast. Anyway, Wilford and I had lunch together in those early months. And he said, look, there's one thing you've got to remember. He said, number one, the people in government don't know any more about state parks than you do. And number two, they're not going to give you any money at all unless you fight for it. You've got to fight for it, and you have to never give up. You have to be more persistent, and you have to outlast them in terms of getting funding for the state parks. And that was a very valuable lesson. It sort of reduced my level of nervousness and intimidation, and I was sort of willing to be an even stronger advocate because of Wilf's words. So I remember that very, very fondly, and I'm very grateful to him for being a mentor to me like he's been to so many people.
Well, it's a little bit bittersweet today. I know that most of us have been encouraged by the fact that Wilford's life was long and full, and up to the last beat of his heart, he was here for his family and for the rest of the community. I became aware of Wilf when I just moved to this area in the late 70s, and was inspired by the columns he wrote, his insight, his kind of quirkiness and the way he described things at times, the fact that he was so well read and that he really seemed to connect so well with people. And then somewhere along the line, I had an opportunity to not only meet his daughter Kara, played with her in symphony, met Gretchen, and then Wilf and Kathy and Rufus, and seeing the diversity in the way that they went about integrating in the community and always being open to new ideas was inspirational. I think Wilf, a specific memory I have of him was just a few years back when we opened a Democratic headquarters office on Wenatchee Avenue, which we do about every 4 years. And he'd walk down every morning from his home, and I think he was on the lookout for a new pastry shop and a good cup of coffee or something. So he'd stop by our office and see what was the hot topic of the day. And then I'm sure he stopped by the Republican headquarters office and did exactly the same thing. And sometimes he'd write a little bit about it, but it was always just nice to hear him coming, his whistle, and see the lilt in his step, and his presence was always cheerful, and I'll really miss that. But I have good memories of it, and I know many other people do too.
Hi, I'm Steve Robinson with Pybus Market. I had the pleasure and honor of working at the Wenatchee World for some 13 or 14 years. And in that capacity, I remember my first encounter with Wilfred. It was in the summer of 1999, July, 85, 90 degrees out, and I was driving from our Mission Street office building over to the 9th Street printing plant at about 11:30 in the morning. And there's Wilfred walking along the sidewalk. Again, remember, it's 85 or 90 degrees out. I'm in the comfort of my air-conditioned car, and I pull over on the side of the road, roll the window down, and stick my head out and say, "Wilfred, would you like a ride? It's hot out." And Wilfred looks at me like I'm kind of crazy and says, "Nope, I'm happy, I'm gonna walk." I didn't know he was a walker at that time, and that kind of, I realized at that moment that this is a pretty special guy who likes to walk the 1.5 or 2 miles from our office building to the 9th Street building in 80-degree temperature. So, special guy, special newspaper, special gifts that he provided to the community, a legacy of community support, kindness, friendship, working for the common good.
Hi, my name is Doug Head. I was the director of Children's Home Society here in Wenatchee for about 30 plus years, and I think that was the context in which I got to know Wilf. And I have two stories to tell. One is that Wilf and I agreed to meet down at the plant to see that first newspaper hot off the press. And of course he walks, what, a mile, 2 miles to get to the plant, and I forgot that I was supposed to meet him. So he walked for another half a mile or 3/4 of a mile to my office to find out where I was. And I thought at the time, I thought, this man is Wilfred Woods, and he's walking to my office to find out where I am. And it was both embarrassing and quite flattering that he would take the time to do that. So that's one story that I have. And then the second story is that some years ago, we spent New Year's Eve at his house with Wilf and Kathy and other people that we knew, including his daughter Kara, and we played Trivial Pursuit. And Kara's partner, Cheryl, was so impressed that I did so well with Trivial Pursuit. I don't know if Wilf and Kathy were impressed, but it was something that lived on for quite a few years, and people still talk about my Trivial Pursuit prowess. It was blind luck as far as I'm concerned, but we had such a nice evening, and that was the first time we really socialized with Wilf and Kathy, and we have talked about that for years ever since.
This is Earl Tilley, and I'm the former mayor of Wenatchee from 1994 to 1999. And when I was first running for mayor, I remember going in and talking to Wilf, along with some other community leaders, about what their vision is for the future of Wenatchee. During the course of the visit, he asked me, what do I think about a performing arts center? And I said, well, I've had the same idea, that I think it's something that our community really needs real bad, and I would certainly support that. So during that campaign, the city got involved and was helpful in working out the lease with the Performing Arts Center group. On another occasion, I was talking to Wilf someplace at a social event probably, and we were talking about hiking, and he'd heard about a hike to Wedge Mountain. I just told him, well, that's one of my favorite hikes. It's kind of like a sacred pilgrimage to me. And I said, you know, from it you can look down on the Snow Lakes, you can see the beginning of the enchantments. He said, well, would you take me there? And I said, sure, but you know, this guy was 80 years old at the time, and I thought, well, it's pretty steep all the way. It's 2,000 foot of elevation to gain. But he was, you know, I knew his reputation of hiking on his Wenatchee World hikes, and so we set a date and we went, and he made it. And like most people, when he got to the top, he just exclaimed about the beauty of that scene below us, and in the far distant future, the enchantments. I had another neat experience with the Woods family. In 1978, the Wenatchee World sponsored a trip, a water resource trip to various parts of the northern hemisphere. We went as far north as Prudhoe Bay. We went over into Inuit and Yellowknife, coming back through Canada and Northwest Territory. And I actually got better acquainted with the Woods family on that occasion. My last thing I would share is in 1990-91, we were involved heavily in a campaign to build a new senior center in Wenatchee. And the Wenatchee World was very, very supportive of this. They made a monetary contribution. They did they made some flyers for us that were inserts in every copy of the paper that went out. And it helped us have a very, very successful fundraising campaign. And so we owe a lot to the Woods family for their support for the Senior Center, which today is a very, very viable service in our community. Must have been 30 or 35 years ago, maybe 40 years ago. Our families, I know, were very young, and mutual friends of the Woodses, Kathy and Wilf, were Bob and Mary Kidner. And with Bob's leadership, he had heard about a program called Living Room Dialogues. And it was based on the Vatican II conference of the Roman Catholic Church that Pope John had instituted. Under his leadership, it was to bring Christians together to dialogue on what they had in common over what their differences were. And so there were 8 couples. There were 3 couples who were Roman Catholic and 5 couples that were other Protestant denominations. And we met once a month in various members' homes. And we built a strong friendship with all the participants. And we really did develop a truly ecumenical faith experience out of that we treasure to this day.
I'm Paul Gray. I was born and raised up in the White River Valley, 5 miles above Lake Wenatchee. My first encounter with Wilford Woods was when I was about 5 years old. My father and I were shoveling snow off of a building, about sometime in March probably, maybe February. And Wilford, Bob Woods, Dale Allen, Huey, Lou Sprague, Phil Rowe, probably Walt Anderson, were all headed up to Twin Lakes on a winter ski trip. At that time, the trail to Twin Lakes was to go up the Napequa and up through the Twin Creek Gorge. Anyway, Wilford took a picture of me up on the, what we call the Little House roof, and I'm out fairly close to the edge of the roof. It's 20 feet down if I fell off. No safety rail. Anyway, the one that I was going to share today is about probably 30 years ago now, before they got the printing press they've got out in the north end. This was the last press up on Mission Street. And I say the last press because I got around the original Hoe too. That's Hoe spelled H-O-E. Anyway, the press was controlled or run by 2 large DC motors, and the controller for them was all electronic. They had a failure. It burned a lot of wires in the bundles of wires in the control cabinet. I'm sure it made a heck of a lot of smoke. The first I learned about it was Romy Newmiller called me and told me what was going on. And Romy was one of my many mentors as I was growing up and learning my trade of electric motor repair. And I go up there and look at it. Romy made the switch from teacher to student like I've seen few people do. We're in there tearing wires out of the back of the control cabinet to get rid of all the burned off wires, eliminate the components that had failed that weren't really needed. And Wilford comes in, looks around, we're just about done. We've got the whole back of the cabinet with all these bare wires separated with pieces of cardboard and piles of newsprint, anything we could get to separate them. And we're talking about 700 volts DC. He says, Paul, are we going to print the paper today? I looked at Wilford and I said, don't know, Wilford. Tell you in about 5 minutes. Less than 5 minutes later, he hears the bell go off. A printing press has an alarm bell on it. Anytime it's going to move, not moved, going to move, the alarm bell goes off. He hears the alarm. He walks into the press room. The press is rolling probably quarter speed. There's a few printed papers coming off. Bud Preston's standing there holding one, looking at it to see what the quality of the print is. I'm looking at a copy, and Wilford gives me the finger under the chin, shut it off. Bud Preston shuts it down. They put on a new front page. Gray's Electric was on the front page of the Daily World that day. And it just, that's one of the many, many times I've encountered Wilford along the way in my life. I do not remember his father, Rufus. Of course, I've gotten a chance to pick on young Rufus.
That's great.
And I'm going to leave that alone there, because I could sit here all day and tell stories about things that I've run into with Wilford. I'm going to sit down and type it up and send it to that email site.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you for sharing that.